On a cold, rain-soaked night in Portland, Russ Miller walked past a dumpster behind a diner, searching for anything worth recycling. At 52, he never imagined his life would come to this, living in a broken-down van, one meal away from nothing. Then he saw them, 3 children, small and shivering, digging through restaurant trash with careful, practiced hands. No adults, no one watching over them, just hunger and silence. Russ had barely enough for himself, but he couldn't leave them there. He took them in, shared what little he had, and built something neither expected, a family. Months later, a photograph changed everything. The children weren't abandoned runaways. They were heirs to a $99 million fortune. Would Russ lose the only family he had left? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when Russ Miller found himself standing in the alley behind Rosie's Diner on Southeast Morrison Street. The laminated badge clipped to his jacket pocket, expired now for 6 months, caught the dim glow from the security light above. Construction foreman, it read. Mill Creek Development Corp. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He'd been a good foreman once. Ran crews of 20 men. Built office complexes and shopping centers across the Portland metro area. Had a small house in Gresham, a truck that didn't leak oil, and a daughter who called him every Sunday. Then came the fall from the scaffolding, 3 stories down onto concrete. Shattered hip, torn ligaments, 6 months of recovery that stretched into a year. The company paid for the surgery, but not the mortgage. The pills helped with the pain, but not with the darkness that followed. His ex-wife Beverly had tried. He'd give her that. Brought casseroles, drove him to physical therapy, held him when the nightmares came. But depression is a slow poison, and pride makes it lethal. He pushed her away, pushed everyone away. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday. Custody arrangements on a Friday. By the time he realized what he'd lost, his daughter Autumn was 17 and wouldn't return his calls. Now he was 52 years old, living in a 1998 Dodge van with a cracked windshield and a sliding door that wouldn't close all the way. The van sat in the parking lot of a 24-hour fitness center on 82nd Avenue. $30 a month for a membership he used only for the showers and the bathroom. Everything he owned fit in 2 duffel bags and a plastic storage bin. A sleeping bag that smelled like mildew. A camping stove with 1 working burner. A photo album he couldn't bring himself to open. The work came sporadically now. Day labor at construction sites where nobody asked questions about the gap in his resume. Collecting cans and bottles for the deposit refunds. 5 cents each. It took 200 cans to make $10. He'd gotten good at finding them, knew which dumpsters behind which restaurants were worth checking. That's what brought him to the alley that night. Rosie's Diner threw out cases of beer bottles every Wednesday. The rain had kept most other scavengers away, which meant the pickings should be good. He pushed his shopping cart, stolen from a Fred Meyer parking lot, through puddles that reflected the neon signs from the street. That's when he saw them. 3 children huddled together near the dumpster. The oldest couldn't have been more than 11, a boy with dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. He was holding the lid of the dumpster open, while a girl, maybe 8, stood on an overturned crate and carefully lifted items out. A third child, smaller than the others, sat on the ground clutching a plastic bag. Russ stopped, stood there in the rain watching. The boy's movements were methodical, protective. The girl sorted through the trash with practiced efficiency. This wasn't their first time. The little one stayed quiet, patient, like he understood his role was to wait. No parents, no adults anywhere in sight. Just 3 kids picking through garbage at 10 o'clock at night in the rain. Russ's first instinct was to walk away. He had his own problems. Could barely take care of himself, let alone 3 children who weren't his responsibility. But he stood there frozen, watching the older boy reach into the dumpster and pull out a bag of day-old bread. The way the boy's face lit up, like he'd found treasure, made something crack open in Russ's chest. He thought of Autumn, thought of the last time he'd seen her 2 years ago at a coffee shop in Beaverton. She'd been stiff, formal, said she needed space. He'd respected that space right into permanent silence. "Hey," Russ called out, his voice rougher than he intended. The three children froze. The boy stepped in front of the other two, his thin body tense, ready to run. The girl grabbed the smaller child's hand. They looked like rabbits about to bolt. Russ raised his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. Are you kids okay?" The boy stared at him, evaluating. Up close, Russ could see how thin they were. How their clothes, nice clothes, he noticed, not typical street kid hand-me-downs, hung loose on their frames. How their eyes held a wariness that children shouldn't possess. "We're fine," the boy said. His voice was clear, educated. Not what Russ expected. "Where are your parents?" The boy's jaw tightened. "Around a lie." Russ had told enough of them to recognize the cadence. "It's late. And cold. You kids need somewhere warm to sleep?" The younger children looked at their brother, and they were siblings. That much was obvious in the similar angles of their faces. The boy hesitated, and Russ saw the internal calculation happening. Stranger danger versus the very real danger of another night in the rain. "I've got a van," Russ said. "It's not much, but it's dry. I can get you some food. No strings. If you want to leave in the morning, you leave." The girl spoke for the first time, her voice small. "Do you have soup?" Something about the question, the specificity of it, the hope, broke Russ's heart. "Yeah," he said softly. "I've got soup." That's how it started. Three children following a stranger through the rain to a beat-up van in a gym parking lot. The boy kept his distance, watchful. The girl held the little one's hand. Russ unlocked the van's back doors, pulled out his camping stove, and heated up 2 cans of chicken noodle soup in a dented pot. He split his remaining sleeve of saltine crackers between them. They ate in silence, sitting in the back of the van with the doors open just enough to let the propane fumes escape. Russ watched them from the front seat, watched how they savored every spoonful, how they didn't fight over the last crackers. When they finished, the younger boy, he looked about 6, finally spoke. "Thank you, mister." "Russ," he said. "My name's Russ." The older boy nodded slowly. "I'm Levi. This is Nina and Simon. First names only." Russ understood. "You kids want to tell me what you're doing out here?" Levi's expression shut down. "We're managing." "For how long?" "Long enough." Russ studied them. Clean faces despite the dirt. Good teeth. These weren't kids who'd grown up on the streets. Something had happened, something recent that put them here. "Okay," Russ said finally. "Here's what's going to happen. You 3 are going to sleep in the back of the van tonight. I'll sleep in the front seat. In the morning, we'll figure out what comes next." Nina's eyes widened. "We can stay?" "Tonight, yeah. We'll see about tomorrow when tomorrow comes." He gave them his sleeping bag and the spare blanket he kept for cold nights. Watch them curl up together, Simon in the middle, Levi on the outside like a sentinel. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed them. Russ sat in the driver's seat, his jacket pulled tight against the cold, and listened to them breathe. 3 children who should have been someone else's responsibility. 3 children he absolutely could not afford to help, but he thought of that bread bag and the way Levi's face had lit up. Thought of his own daughter, somewhere out there in the world, believing he didn't care. Maybe he couldn't fix what he'd broken with Autumn. Maybe that ship had sailed and sunk. But these 3 kids right now needed someone to give a damn, just for tonight, he told himself. Just until morning. But morning came, and he didn't make them leave. And the morning after that, and the one after that. Days turned into a week, and Russ found himself adjusting, making room, sharing what little he had. He taught them the rhythms of survival, where the free breakfast programs were at local churches, which gas stations had the cleanest bathrooms and didn't hassle homeless people, how to wash clothes in the sink at the community center, how to stay invisible when you needed to be invisible. The children were smart, adaptable. Levi had a gift for numbers, could calculate sale percentages in his head faster than Russ could pull out a calculator. Nina drew constantly, sketching on scraps of paper with a mechanical pencil she guarded like gold. Simon loved stories, would listen with rapt attention whenever Russ made up tales about talking animals or brave knights. Bernie, an old homeless vet who camped 2 spots over, stopped by one morning. He was in his 70s, face weathered by years of living rough, but his eyes were sharp. Those kids, Bernie said, watching them brush their teeth at the water fountain. They got people looking for them. They're runaways, Russ said. Bernie shook his head. Nah, foster runaways dress different, act different. These kids got education, got manners. Somebody raised them right before things went sideways. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. Kids that clean, that well-spoken, someone's going to come looking. And when they do, questions will get asked about the man who's got them. The warning lodged itself in Russ's gut, but he pushed it away. These children needed him. For the first time in 2 years, he had a reason to get up in the morning, had a purpose beyond just surviving another day. He found work, 2 days of painting a warehouse in northwest Portland. The foreman paid cash at the end of each shift. Russ took the money straight to Goodwill and bought the kids warmer jackets, better shoes, clothes that fit properly. That night, as he watched them model their new jackets in the van, Simon looked up at him and said, "Thanks." "Dad," the boy caught himself immediately, face flushing. I didn't. It's okay, Russ said, his throat tight. It's okay, but it wasn't okay. It was everything. It was terrifying and wonderful and more responsibility than he'd ever wanted. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, Bernie's warning echoed. Someone's going to come looking. 3 weeks passed, and a routine emerged. Russ found more work, 5 days of demolition on a project in Hillsborough. The steady income meant actual meals, not just soup and crackers. It meant gas in the van's tank and enough left over to think about winter, which was coming fast. He made a decision that felt risky but necessary. The children needed structure, needed something beyond the daily scramble for survival. The Morrison Community Center offered free programs for low-income families. Hot lunches, activities, a safe place to spend the day. The paperwork was minimal, the questions vague enough that Russ could answer without outright lying. Phyllis Turner ran the center, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much to judge quickly. She looked at the forms Russ had filled out, then at the 3 children sitting quietly in the hallway. "You're working on getting their official documents?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "It's complicated." "Family situation." Phyllis studied him for a long moment. She'd worked with homeless families for 20 years. She knew the difference between a man trying to help and a man trying to harm. "The children stay together," she said finally. "And if I have any concerns, we'll be having another conversation." Understood. The community center transformed the children. Levi joined a math enrichment group and solved problems meant for high schoolers. Nina discovered the art room and spent hours painting watercolors with a focus that made the instructor marvel. Simon found the reading corner and burned through picture books, then chapter books, his vocabulary expanding daily. Phyllis pulled Russ aside one afternoon. "These children have had excellent education. Private school quality. Where did you say they came from?" "Family circumstances," Russ deflected. "It's been rough for them." She didn't press, but he could see the questions in her eyes. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, a local news crew arrived at the center. They were filming a feel-good piece about community programs that made a difference. The reporter interviewed children, captured footage of activities, talked to Phyllis about funding and impact. Russ was at work when it happened. He didn't see how Levi immediately pulled Nina and Simon behind a bookshelf when the camera swung their way. Didn't see how they hid their faces, or how Nina started crying silently. Phyllis noticed, though. She made sure to keep the camera crew on the other side of the room, but not before a few seconds of footage caught 3 children in the background. Barely visible. Just enough. When Russ picked them up that evening, Levi was tense in a way he hadn't been since the first night. Nina held Simon's hand in a white-knuckled grip. They climbed into the van without speaking. "What happened?" Russ asked. "Nothing," Levi said too quickly. Russ drove back to their usual parking spot. The rain had started again, turning the windshield into a river of distorted light. He turned off the engine and shifted in his seat to face them. "Levi, what happened?" The boy's jaw worked. There were cameras. At the center, understanding dawned cold and heavy. "You don't want to be seen." "We can't be seen," Nina whispered. "Why? What are you running from?" But before Levi could answer, Russ noticed something tucked under his windshield wiper. A business card, white and simple, already soaked through. He got out, retrieved it, and climbed back into the van. The card was plain. No company name, no logo. Just a name, Anthony Chen, and a phone number below a single line of text. Regarding the children. Call me. Russ's hands tightened on the card. How long has this been here? I don't know. It wasn't there this morning. Someone knew. Someone had found them. That night, Russ couldn't sleep. He lay in the front seat listening to the rain drum on the van's roof, listening to the children breathe in the back. Every set of headlights that passed made his pulse spike. At 3 a.m, he finally dozed off, only to wake at dawn to find another card under his wiper. Same card. Same message. Bernie appeared as Russ was staring at it. The old veteran walked over, coffee in hand from the gas station across the street. Man came by yesterday, Bernie said. Expensive suit. Foreign car. Had a photograph. 3 kids. Looked just like yours. Russ's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? Nothing. Don't know nothing. Bernie sipped his coffee. But he'll be back. Men like that always come back. The children woke to find Russ pacing beside the van. Levy took one look at his face and knew. We need to leave, the boy said. We need to talk first. I need to know what's going on. Who's looking for you? Levi's composure finally cracked. We can't go back. Please don't make us go back. Nina started crying, the kind of silent tears that spoke of practiced grief. Simon clung to Russ's jacket, his small hands fisting in the worn fabric. Russ knelt down to their level. I'm not making you do anything. But I can't protect you if I don't understand what we're protecting you from. Levi's voice shook. Our grandfather died. Then people came, lawyers, men in suits. They said they were there to take care of us. But something felt wrong. I heard them talking about asset management and estate liquidation. They looked at us like we were problems to solve, not people. So you ran during the funeral. Everyone was distracted. I grabbed Nina and Simon and we left. We've been hiding for 2 months. 2 months. 2 months of 3 children surviving alone on the streets before Russ found them. The weight of it made him feel sick. Your grandfather, what was his name? Levi hesitated, then decided trust was the only option left. Arthur Sterling. The name meant nothing to Russ, but clearly it meant something to the people searching for them. Okay, Russ said, his mind racing through options, none of them good. Okay, we're going to figure this out. But first, we need to move. He spent his last $60 filling the van's gas tank, packed their few possessions into the duffel bags. By noon, they were on the road, heading west toward the coast. Maybe they could lose themselves in one of the small towns along Highway 101. Maybe they could disappear. But as Russ merged onto the highway, he checked his rearview mirror and saw it, a black sedan 3 cars back. Matching their speed, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the back, the children had fallen silent, sensing his tension. Buckle up, he said quietly. Levi looked out the back window and saw the sedan. His face went pale. That's them. Russ pressed the accelerator. The van protested, but obeyed, engine rattling as they picked up speed. The sedan stayed with them, not closing the distance but not falling back either. A message. We know where you are. They drove through the rain, through the grey afternoon turning to grey evening, with headlights following like patient predators. Russ took random exits, doubled back, used every evasive trick he could think of. Sometimes the sedan disappeared. Sometimes it reappeared miles later, as if it had never left. By the time they reached the coast, the children were exhausted from fear, and Russ's hands ached from gripping the wheel. He pulled into a small town called Seaside Bluffs, population barely breaking 2,000. Found a mechanic shop just as it was closing. The van chose that moment to prove Bernie's warnings about its reliability. The engine made a grinding sound and died in the parking lot. A man in coveralls walked out, wiping his hands on a rag. His name tag read Dutch, timing belt, Dutch said after popping the hood. Maybe the water pump too. I'll need 2 days, maybe 3. Have to order parts. 2 days. Stuck in a town small enough that strangers would be noticed immediately. How much? Russ asked, already knowing the answer would be more than he had. Dutch quoted a price that took everything Russ had saved, plus money he didn't have. They negotiated down to something barely manageable, and Dutch agreed to let them leave the van. Overnight, Russ found the cheapest motel in town, $40. A night for a room with 2 beds and a bathroom that hadn't been updated since 1985, but it had heat and locks on the door, and the children could shower with hot water for the first time in weeks. That night, while Nina and Simon slept in one bed, Levi sat with Russ by the window. "They're going to find us," the boy said. "Maybe you should leave before they do. You don't need to be part of this." Russ looked at this 11-year-old child trying to be brave, trying to protect him. "I'm already part of this. We're in this together now. Why?" Levi's voice broke. "Why do you care? We're nothing to you." Russ thought about his daughter, about all the times he'd chosen his pride over being present, about the years he'd wasted believing he didn't deserve a second chance. "You're not nothing," he said. "You're 3 kids who needed help. And I'm a man who needed a reason to be better than he's been." Levi wiped at his eyes. "What if it's not enough? What if they take us anyway? Then I'll fight like hell to stop them." It was a promise Russ wasn't sure he could keep. But looking at this child who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd kept his siblings alive through sheer determination, Russ knew he had to try. Outside the motel window, rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the darkness, men in expensive suits were closing in. The motel room became a temporary refuge. 2 days stretched into 3, while Dutch waited for parts that seemed to take forever arriving. Russ counted and recounted his remaining money, enough for 1 more night, maybe 2 if they didn't eat much. The prospect of being stranded in this small coastal town made his chest tight with anxiety, but the children needed the rest. Simon had developed a cough that worried Russ. Nina had dark circles under her eyes that spoke of weeks without proper sleep. Even Levi's rigid vigilance had begun to crack, exhaustion showing through. On the second night, after Nina and Simon had fallen asleep, Levi finally opened up. They sat at the small table by the window, the curtains drawn tight. Russ had bought a pizza, the cheapest one he could find, and they'd split it 4 ways for dinner. Levi picked at the crust, not meeting Russ's eyes. "We lived with our grandfather in a big house," Levi said quietly. "Not like mansion big, but bigger than we needed. He had an estate outside Portland, in the West Hills, gardens and a gate and people who came to clean twice a week." Russ listened without interrupting. "Our parents died when Simon was a baby. Car accident. Grandfather took us in. Levi's voice caught. He was good to us. Taught us things. Made sure we had everything we needed. He said family was the only thing that mattered." "What happened to him?" "Heart attack. At least that's what the doctors said. He was fine one day, then he wasn't. It happened fast." Levi's hands clenched. "After the funeral, these men showed up, lawyers. They said they were from grandfather's company, that they'd been appointed to handle his affairs. They talked about trusts and estate management and our future. That doesn't sound necessarily bad. It wasn't what they said. It was how they said it, how they looked at us." Levi finally met Russ's eyes. One of them, Mr. Gaines, he was grandfather's business partner. He kept talking about protecting the assets and ensuring proper management. He acted like he owned us. "Did your grandfather leave a will?" "I don't know. Nobody would tell us anything. We were shuffled into rooms while adults talked in other rooms. And then I heard Mr. Gaines on the phone. He said something about liquidating certain holdings and the children complicate things, but we'll manage them." The phrase sent ice through Russ's veins. "Manage them how?" "I don't know." But the way he said it, Levi shuddered. "Grandfather told me once, not long before he died, that if anything ever happened to him, I should take care of Nina and Simon. He made me promise. Said sometimes the people who smile the most are the ones you need to watch. So you ran. During the reception after the funeral, everyone was distracted, talking and drinking. I told Nina and Simon we were playing hide and seek. We walked out through the garden gate and just kept walking. We got on a bus downtown, then another one. We stayed in different places, parks, under bridges, behind stores, until you found us. 2 months of 3 children surviving on their own. The magnitude of what Levi had managed made Russ's throat tight. This child had kept his siblings alive through winter nights and rain and hunger, all while grieving his grandfather. Nina stirred in the bed, making a small sound. Levi immediately stood, checking on her, pulling the blanket higher. When he returned to the table, he pulled something from his pocket, a piece of paper, folded many times, worn soft at the creases. It was a drawing. Nina had sketched it in pencil probably weeks ago. It showed a large house with tall windows, gardens surrounding it, and 3 small figures standing in front. Even in simple lines, Russ could see the skill, the way she'd captured perspective and depth. She drew this from memory, Levi said. But when she realized what she'd done, she tried to tear it up. Said we weren't supposed to remember, weren't supposed to talk about it. He carefully folded it again. But I kept it. Because it was home. And you're not supposed to forget home, right? Russ thought about his own small house in Gresham, sold to pay medical bills, about the life he'd lost piece by piece. No, you're not supposed to forget. The next morning brought concerning news. Dutch appeared at the motel, wiping grease from his hands. Parts came in. I'll have your van ready by this afternoon. He paused, shifted his weight. Had a visitor at the shop this morning. Well-dressed fellow in a rental car. Asked if I'd seen a man traveling with 3 children. Showed me a picture on his phone. Russ's pulse hammered. What did you tell him? Told him I see lots of people passing through. Can't remember everyone. Dutch met his eyes. But he's staying at the Ocean View Inn. Only other lodging in town. He'll be asking around. Seaside Bluffs is small. People notice strangers. After Dutch left, Russ made a decision. They couldn't keep running blind. He needed to understand what they were running from, who Arthur Sterling had been, what kind of estate they were talking about, why powerful men were chasing 3 children. He walked to the public library, a small building 2 blocks from the motel. The children stayed in the room with strict instructions to keep the door locked and open it only for him. The librarian, a young woman with purple hair, showed him to the computer terminals. Russ's hands shook slightly as he typed Arthur Sterling Portland into the search engine. The obituary appeared first. Arthur Caldwell Sterling, age 72, passed away unexpectedly at his home. Beloved philanthropist and businessman, founder of Sterling Holdings, devoted grandfather. Services were private. In lieu of flowers, donations could be made to the Sterling Foundation for Family Services. Russ clicked through to articles about Sterling Holdings. Real estate development, investment portfolios, technology sector partnerships. The descriptions were vague, written in the language of old money that didn't need to advertise itself. One article from 3 years ago showed a photograph, Arthur Sterling at a charity gala. He was tall, silver-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The caption mentioned his work with homeless families, programs that provided housing and job training, a man who'd built his fortune but used it to help others. That tracked with the grandfather Levi described, but nothing about the estate's value. Nothing about the children beyond the phrase, survived by 3 minor grandchildren, in the obituary. Their names weren't even listed. Russ searched for Everett Gaines Portland and found a LinkedIn profile. Chief Operations Officer of Sterling Holdings. Various business ventures. Board positions. A photograph showed a man in his 50s, handsome in the way expensive dental work and good suits created. Smiling, professional, nothing that screamed villain. But then, the dangerous ones never did. He returned to the motel to find the children exactly where he'd left them. Simon was reading a book the motel had left in the drawer, a Gideon Bible. Nina was drawing on the back of motel stationery. Levi stood at the window, watching the street. We need to go soon, Levi said without turning around. I saw that car again. The black sedan. It drove past twice. Russ checked his watch. 3 hours until Dutch said the van would be ready. 3 hours to stay hidden in a town where everyone noticed everyone. That afternoon, as they prepared to leave, Simon pulled something from his pocket. A silver pocket watch, old and beautiful, the metal engraved with initials ACS. Papa gave me this, Simon said, opening it to show the inscription inside. Time spent with family is worth every second. The watch was clearly valuable, antique, well-maintained. More importantly, it was traceable. If someone was looking for Arthur Sterling's grandchildren, they might be looking for his personal effects too. Simon, that's beautiful. But maybe we should keep it hidden, okay? Somewhere very safe. The boy nodded and tucked it back into his pocket, closer to his heart than Russ's warning to hide it would suggest. Dutch had the van ready at 4 o'clock. Russ paid him everything he had left except for $20. As they loaded their bags into the back, Dutch pulled Russ aside. Listen, I don't know what you're mixed up in, and I don't need to know. But those kids, they're good kids. I can tell. He pressed something into Russ's hand. A business card with his number. You get in real trouble, you call. I was Army long time ago. Still remember a few things about watching your six. Russ's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just take care of them. They drove out of Seaside Bluffs as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Russ headed south on Highway 101, then cut inland toward Eugene. Bernie had mentioned once that his cousin ran a halfway house there. It was a thin thread of hope, but it was something. Behind them, about a mile back, a black sedan pulled onto the highway. Levi saw it first. They're following us again, I know. What do we do? Russ thought about Dutch's card in his pocket. About Arthur Sterling's watch hidden against Simon's chest. About 3 children who'd been through too much already. We keep moving, he said, and we figure out who we can trust. Because somewhere in this mess of money and mystery, there had to be someone who cared more about these children than about controlling them. There had to be. He just had to find them before the black sedan caught up. The drive to Eugene took 4 hours through winding back roads that tested the van's newly repaired engine. Russ avoided the interstate, taking rural highways through small towns with names like Drain and Cottage Grove. The black sedan disappeared and reappeared like a persistent ghost, never close enough to be threatening, but never far enough to forget. They stopped for gas in a town too small to have a name on Russ's map. While the pump clicked through dollars he barely had, Simon climbed out of the van and pulled out the pocket watch. He opened it, studied the inscription, then looked up at Russ. Papa always said this would help me remember what matters. Russ knelt down to Simon's level. What do you think he meant? That time with people you love is the most important thing. More important than money or houses or anything else. The boy's eyes were too old for his 6 years. Do you think Papa knew something bad would happen? The question hit Russ hard. He thought about the timing, Arthur Sterling dying suddenly, his business partner immediately moving to control the children. The way Levi had overheard conversations about assets and management. I think your grandfather loved you very much. And I think he wanted you to remember that, no matter what happened. Simon nodded and carefully tucked the watch away. As they climbed back into the van, Russ caught Levi's eye in the rearview mirror. The boy had been listening, and his expression said he was thinking the same thing Russ was. That maybe Arthur Sterling's death hadn't been as natural as the doctors claimed. Eugene appeared through the rain just after dark. Russ navigated to the address Bernie had given him months ago, scrawled on a napkin that had survived in his glove compartment. The halfway house was on a quiet street near the university, a 2-story craftsman that had seen better decades, but wore its age with dignity. A woman answered his knock. She was in her 50s, with grey streaked hair pulled back and eyes that assessed him in 3 seconds flat. Help you? Bernie sent me. From Portland. He said his cousin Lorraine runs a place that helps families. Her expression didn't soften. Bernie hasn't called me in 2 years. I know. I'm sorry. We need a place to stay. Just one night. I can work for it. Fix things, clean, whatever you need. She looked past him to where the children sat in the van, 3 small faces pressed against the window. Something in her expression shifted. One night. Then we talk about what comes next. The house smelled like coffee and old wood and safety. Lorraine showed them to a room upstairs with 2 beds and clean sheets. There was a bathroom down the hall with hot water and towels that didn't smell like mildew. The children looked at it all like it was a palace. Dinner was spaghetti and garlic bread, served at a long table with 4 other residents, 2 single mothers and their children. Everyone was quiet, tired, carrying the weight of circumstances that had brought them here. But there was warmth too, the kind that comes from shared understanding. After dinner, Russ helped Lorraine wash dishes while the children played cards with the other kids in the living room. "Those kids yours?" Lorraine asked, scrubbing a pot. "Not by blood." "That wasn't what I asked." Russ dried a plate, considering his answer. "Yeah, they're mine." She nodded like that settled something. "How long you been on the streets?" 6 months. "Kids have been with me for about a month. Where's their family?" "It's complicated." Lorraine handed him another plate. "It always is. But complicated doesn't make it go away." That night, after the children fell asleep, Levi slipped out of bed and found Russ sitting on the front porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cold. "Couldn't sleep?" Russ asked. Levi sat down beside him. From his pocket, he pulled out a folded piece of newspaper, worn from being carried for months. He handed it to Russ without speaking. It was Arthur Sterling's obituary, the full version from the Oregonian. Russ read it by the porch light. Arthur Caldwell Sterling, 72, passed unexpectedly at his home on October 3rd, survived by 3 minor grandchildren. Philanthropist, businessman, founder of Sterling Holdings, with ventures in real estate development, technology investment, and financial services. Board member of numerous charitable organizations. Services private. Estate matters being handled by Sterling Holdings executive team. The article was carefully worded, revealing little. No mention of estate value. No naming of the grandchildren. Nothing about guardianship arrangements. "I took this the morning we ran," Levi said. "Thought maybe we'd need it someday. To prove who we were. Why show me now?" "Because you should know who you're protecting. What you're risking." Levi's voice was steady but quiet. "Grandfather was rich. Really rich. And Mr. Gaines was his partner for 20 years. They built everything together. What happened to your parents?" "The obituary says minor grandchildren but doesn't mention them." Levi's jaw tightened. "They died when I was 6. Nina was 3. Simon was just a baby. Car accident on Highway 26, coming back from the coast. Papa never talked about it much. Said it hurt too much to remember, and he raised you alone after that. He had help. Housekeepers, tutors, people who worked for him. But yeah, mostly just him. He taught us everything. How to read, how to think, how to see through people who smile while planning to hurt you." Levi's voice cracked. "He said that's what his business partner was. A smiling snake. He said that about Gaines? Not in those words, but he warned me. The last week before he died, Grandfather was different, worried. He called his lawyer a lot. Changed things in his office. One night, he told me that if anything happened to him, I should trust Miss Vance. She was his personal attorney, and no one else. Especially not Mr. Gaines." Russ absorbed this. "Did your grandfather seem sick? Before the heart attack?" Levi thought about it. He seemed tired, said he wasn't sleeping well, but he was still doing everything normal. Working, having meetings, teaching Simon to play chess. Then one morning I woke up and he was gone. The housekeeper found him in his study. The doctors came. Then the funeral. Then Gaines took over everything. How long between his death and when you ran? 10 days. The funeral was on day 7. We ran on day 10, after I heard Gaines talking about managing assets like we were property he'd inherited. The timeline was tight, suspiciously tight. A man warns his grandson not to trust his business partner, dies suddenly, and within days that same business partner moves to control everything, including the children. Russ had no proof of anything criminal, but his gut, which had kept him alive through some dark times, was screaming that Arthur Sterling's death wasn't natural. The next morning, Lorraine made pancakes and asked direct questions. Russ gave careful answers. She was too smart to be fooled, but she seemed willing to accept partial truths for the sake of the children. "You can stay 3 days, she said. "That's my maximum without proper paperwork. Use the time to figure out your next move." But the next move found them first. On the second day, while Russ was helping repair a broken fence in the backyard, a black sedan pulled up across the street. A man in a suit stepped out, spoke briefly with a neighbor, then approached Lorraine's front door. Russ saw him through the fence slats. His pulse kicked into overdrive. Lorraine answered the knock. Russ moved closer, listening. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Anthony Chen. I'm a private investigator working on behalf of the Sterling family." His voice was professional, smooth. "I'm looking for 3 children who've been missing since early October. I have reason to believe they may be in this area." "Don't know anything about that," Lorraine said. "The children were taken from their legal guardian following their grandfather's death. The man who has them, Russell Miller, may not realize the severity of the situation. The family just wants the children returned safely. Taken." The word hung in the air like an accusation. "If I see anything, I'll let the police know," Lorraine said firmly. "The family would prefer to handle this privately. Legal proceedings can be traumatic for children. If you have any information, said I'd call the police. Now get off my property." Chen's professional demeanor slipped slightly. "This isn't over, ma'am. Those children are heirs to a significant estate. People are concerned about their welfare. Concerned about their welfare or concerned about their money." The investigator's smile was cold. "That's not for you to decide. Have a good day." He left, but the threat lingered like smoke. Lorraine found Russ in the backyard. "You need to go tonight. That man's going to come back with police or lawyers or both. I know. Those kids, are they actually heirs to something?" Russ hesitated, then nodded. "Their grandfather was Arthur Sterling. He died a few months ago." Lorraine's eyes widened. "The philanthropist? The one who funded half the family services programs in Oregon?" "Yes. And you just happened to find his grandchildren digging through trash." "That's exactly what happened. I didn't know who they were. I just saw 3 kids who needed help." She studied his face, then made a decision. "There's a lawyer in Seattle. Patricia Vance. She does pro bono work for families in crisis. If Arthur Sterling was who you say he was, she might have known him. Might be able to help." She wrote down a name and number on a piece of paper. "Call her. Tell her Lorraine sent you. Tell her Arthur Sterling's grandchildren need protection." That night, after the children were asleep, Russ stood outside with his phone, a burner he'd bought months ago for emergencies. He stared at Patricia Vance's number for 10 minutes before dialing. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Patricia. My name is Russell Miller. I have 3 children with me. Their grandfather was Arthur Sterling, and I think they're in danger." There was a long pause. Then, "Mr. Miller, I've been looking for those children for 2 months. Tell me where you are." Patricia Vance spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades navigating legal battlefields. "Don't tell me where you are over the phone. Are the children safe right now? This moment?" "Yes." "Good. Arthur Sterling changed his will 3 weeks before he died. The new will names the children as direct heirs to his entire estate, with a panel of 3 trustees to manage it until they reach adulthood." "I'm one of those trustees." Russ's hand tightened on the phone. "What about Everett Gaines?" A pause. "You know about Gaines?" The children ran from him. They were terrified. They were right to be. The original will left everything to Gaines as sole trustee with broad discretionary powers. Arthur realized Everett had been embezzling from their shared ventures. Arthur confronted him, changed the will to protect the children. Then Arthur died. You think Gaines killed him? I think Arthur Sterling was a healthy 72-year-old man who died suddenly and conveniently. But I can't prove it. Not yet, her voice hardened. What I can prove is that those children are in danger as long as Gaines thinks he can control them. The estate is worth $99 million. The children are sole heirs, but with them missing, Gaines has filed to have them declared abandoned and himself appointed emergency guardian. The accusation landed like a physical blow. I didn't kidnap anyone. I believe you. But belief doesn't matter in court. Evidence does. We need to bring the children somewhere safe and fight Gaines legally. Patricia gave him an address in Bellingham, just south of the Canadian border. A property held in a trust Arthur had set up years ago. Meet me there tomorrow at noon. I'll bring documentation, and we'll figure out how to protect these children properly. The next day, they drove 6 hours through mountain mist. The cabin was tucked into the woods, far enough from town to be private. Patricia's silver SUV was already there. She emerged as they pulled up, a woman in her late 60s, with steel-grey hair and eyes that had seen every courtroom trick twice. She looked at the children through the van's window, her expression softening. "Levi, Nina, Simon, your grandfather talked about you constantly. I'm so sorry for your loss." Levi studied her warily. "Papa mentioned you, said you were the only lawyer worth trusting." He had strong opinions about lawyers. Patricia smiled sadly. "Come inside. We have much to discuss." The cabin was simple but comfortable. Patricia had brought groceries and warm clothes. While the children explored, she spread papers across the kitchen table. Arthur made these changes on September 15th. He died on October 3rd. 18 days. She pointed to key passages in the will. The estate goes directly to the children in equal shares. 3 trustees manage it until each child reaches 25. Myself, a financial advisor Arthur trusted, and a child welfare advocate. What about gains? Removed entirely. Arthur also filed a formal complaint about Everett's business practices. The investigation was just beginning when Arthur died. Patricia's jaw tightened. Gaines had motive, means, and opportunity. She pulled out another document, an envelope addressed in careful handwriting, "To my grandchildren's guardian." Arthur was specific. "The letter goes to whoever's been protecting them." Russ's hands shook as he opened it. The letter was written on heavy paper. "To whoever is reading this, if you've found my grandchildren, if you've kept them safe, then you're the person I hoped would exist. You protected 3 children when you had nothing to gain. That makes you family. My business partner, Everett Gaines, is a dangerous man. I discovered he'd been stealing for years. When I confronted him, he threatened me, threatened my grandchildren. I changed my will to protect them, but I fear it may not be enough. If I'm gone and you're reading this, then Everett made good on his threats. Please protect them. Give them the life I wanted for them. Normal, grounded, filled with love. I've arranged provisions." Patricia has instructions and resources. The estate includes funding for their guardian, housing, living expenses, education, not charity. You've earned it by caring when others wouldn't. I was once like you. Lost, struggling, uncertain. Someone gave me a chance. This is my chance to pass that forward. Take care of my grandchildren, and let them take care of you. That's what family does. With gratitude and hope, Arthur Sterling Russ read it twice, his vision blurring. This man he'd never met had somehow known. He had planned for someone like him. He was a good man, Patricia said quietly. Levi appeared in the doorway. "What does it say?" Russ handed him the letter. The boy read it, then passed it to Nina, who read it aloud to Simon. When they finished, all 3 were crying, tears that come from grief, finally finding permission to exist. Patricia explained the legal situation. "Everett Gaines has filed for emergency custody. There's a hearing scheduled in Seattle in 5 days. The court will decide who gets guardianship. Can Russ keep us?" Nina asked. "That's what we're going to fight for. But the courts prefer stability. Russ has been homeless. The system will question whether he can provide proper care. He's done better than anyone else," Levi said fiercely. "I know, but we need to prepare for a difficult battle." Patricia looked at Russ. "Are you willing to go through home studies, evaluations, legal scrutiny?" Russ thought about his own daughter, about years of failure, thought about 3 children who'd trusted him, thought about Arthur Sterling's letter. Yes, whatever it takes. Patricia handed him another document. "This is the trust provision for guardianship expenses. If you're granted custody, the estate will provide a modest home, living expenses, and a job managing Arthur's charitable foundation. Stable but not extravagant. Arthur wanted the children raised normally. I don't want their money. It's not their money. It's Arthur's gift to whoever protected them." Patricia's expression was firm. "Accept the help so you can give them what they need." Over 2 days, the cabin became a command center. Patricia brought character witnesses. Phyllis, Lorraine, Dutch with his son Trevor. They prepared testimony, reviewed legal strategy, built a case around one truth. Russ Miller had saved 3 children's lives, and those children wanted to stay with him. On the 3rd evening, Beverly called. Russ's ex-wife had heard about the situation. She asked to come to Seattle. Asked if Autumn could come too. Russ almost said no, but Patricia encouraged him. Character witnesses from family carry weight, so they came. And for the first time in 2 years, Russ stood face to face with his daughter, while 3 foster children watched nervously from the porch. "Hi, Dad," Autumn said, and just like that, 2 years of silence cracked open. Autumn had her mother's eyes and Russ's stubborn jawline. At 19, she carried herself with careful independence. Standing on the cabin's gravel driveway, she looked uncertain, younger than her years and older than she should be. "Thanks for coming," Russ said, his voice rough with emotion. "Mom told me what you've been doing. I had to see it myself." Beverly stepped forward, filling the awkward silence. "Let's go inside. I brought casserole and those oatmeal cookies you used to like." Inside, the 2 families circled each other cautiously. Nina showed Autumn her drawings, and something in Autumn's guarded expression softened. Simon asked Beverly about the cookies. Levi stayed close to Russ, watchful. That night, Autumn asked to speak with Russ alone. They walked to the dock behind the cabin. The water reflected the sunset in copper and gold. "I was angry at you for a long time," Autumn said. "After the accident, you just disappeared. Even when you were there, you weren't really there. I needed you, and you were too busy drowning to notice I was drowning too. I know. You're right about all of it. But watching you with those kids, that's the dad I remember. The one who used to take me fishing and help with homework." Her voice caught. "I thought that version of you was gone forever." "I thought so too. What changed?" "I found 3 kids eating from a dumpster, and for the first time in 2 years, something mattered more than my own pain." Autumn wiped at her eyes. "I'm not saying everything's okay between us. You hurt me. That doesn't just go away. But I can see you're trying. And those kids look at you like you hung the moon. Don't let them down the way you let me down." The words were a knife and a gift. "I'm going to try my hardest not to." "Good, because I'm going to testify at your hearing. I'm going to tell the judge you were a good father once, that you lost your way, but you're finding it again." Russ pulled his daughter into a hug, and she let him. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. The next day, Patricia gathered everyone in the living room. "Everett Gaines has excellent attorneys. They'll paint Russ as unstable. They'll present Gaines as a stable guardian who can provide everything. We're fighting uphill. What about character witnesses?" Dutch asked. "That helps. But the court's primary concern is stability. Russ has been homeless for 6 months." Patricia pulled out a folder. "Arthur's trust provisions address this. If custody is granted, the estate provides a home in a good school district, living expenses, and employment through Arthur's foundation. You'd work as outreach coordinator, helping homeless families. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The job pays modestly, enough to support a family comfortably, but not extravagantly. Arthur wanted his grandchildren raised with normal lives. Over the next day, they rehearsed testimony. Patricia asked hard questions the opposition would raise. What about Russ's depression? His failed marriage? How could they trust him with 3 vulnerable children and $99 million? The answers were honest. Yes, Russ had failed before, but he'd shown up when it mattered. That had to count for something. The night before the hearing, Patricia brought sealed envelopes, Arthur's final letters to each child. The children opened them together on the couch. Levi read his first, Arthur praising his strength, encouraging him to protect his siblings, but not at the cost of his own childhood. "Be brave, but remember you're allowed to be young too." Nina's letter told her to keep drawing, that her art would help her process feelings. "Your pictures tell stories that words cannot." Simon's was shortest but deepest. "You are small but mighty. Being youngest doesn't mean being weakest. And remember, family is whoever shows up when you need them most." The children cried, grieving properly for the first time. Russ sat with them, let them lean against him, let them feel what they needed to feel. Later, Patricia sat with Russ on the porch. "Tomorrow won't be easy. Gaines will be there with his legal team. The media might show up. The judge will scrutinize every word. I know. The children will testify in private chambers. Their testimony carries weight, but it's not determinative. The court might not align their wishes with their best interests, meaning they could want me, and the judge could still say no. Yes, Russ stared at the dark lake. Arthur's letter. He knew someone would find them. Someone who cared. He built this whole system around that faith. Arthur understood human nature. He knew genuine care couldn't be faked or bought. Patricia stood. Tomorrow we show the court he was right. Sleep didn't come easily. Russ thought about courtrooms and judges and the possibility he'd lose these children. He thought about Beverly's casserole and Autumn's careful forgiveness and Dutch's loyalty. But a support system he hadn't known he needed. He thought about Arthur Sterling, who'd planned for contingencies and believed in second chances, who'd built an empire but remembered where he came from, who'd loved his grandchildren enough to protect them from beyond the grave. At dawn, Levi was already awake. Arthur's letter spread before him. Can't sleep either. Russ asked, what if they don't let us stay with you? Then I'll fight to visit you. I'll show up, Levi. No matter what happens, I'll show up. That's what Papa's letter said about you. That you'd be someone who shows up. Your grandfather was a wise man. He would have liked you. By 8, everyone was preparing. Patricia helped the children dress in nice clothes. Nothing too formal. Just 3 kids who deserved to be taken seriously. Russ put on his only dress shirt. Beverly straightened his collar. Autumn squeezed his hand. You've got this, Dad. They drove to Seattle in convoy. The courthouse came into view through morning fog, imposing and grey. In the parking lot, Russ saw them. Reporters with cameras, curious onlookers, and men in expensive suits. At the center stood Everett Gaines, looking every inch the successful businessman. He saw Russ and the children. His smile widened. Predatory. Russ put his hands on the children's shoulders. Stay close. Remember what Patricia said. Are you scared? Simon asked. Yeah, buddy. I'm terrified. Me too. That's okay. Being scared just means we care. And caring means we fight. They walked toward the courthouse together. 3 children. One broken man trying to be better, and a support system held together by belief in second chances. Inside, everything came down to one question. What does family really mean? The answer would determine everything. The courtroom was smaller than Russ expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches. Judge Delacroix presided. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Everett Gaines sat with 3 attorneys, all perfectly groomed and radiating expensive confidence. He looked the part of concerned guardian, worried expression, conservative suit, hands folded as though in prayer. The proceedings began with Gaines's attorneys painting tragedy, 3 orphaned children losing their grandfather, then disappearing. A vagrant taking advantage of vulnerable minors. They produced Russ's eviction notices, termination papers, medical records documenting depression. Mr. Miller is a good man who fell on hard times. But good intentions don't qualify someone to raise 3 children, especially children who stand to inherit considerable wealth. Then Gaines testified. His voice was smooth, practiced. He spoke of his 30-year friendship with Arthur Sterling, how devastated he'd been by Arthur's death, how worried when the children vanished. I made a promise to Arthur, Your Honor, to protect his grandchildren. When they disappeared, I feared the worst. Patricia cross-examined with precision. Mr. Gaines, you were named in Arthur Sterling's original will as trustee with broad powers, correct? Yes, Arthur trusted me, and 3 weeks before his death he changed that will. Removed you entirely. Why? Gaines's composure flickered. Arthur had been under stress. I believe someone influenced him, someone like me. I was his attorney for 30 years. Are you suggesting I manipulated him? I'm suggesting he wasn't in his right mind. Yet he passed a competency evaluation by 2 independent physicians, just days before changing his will. The first crack appeared. Patricia continued. You discovered Arthur had found discrepancies in your shared business accounts, didn't you? Financial records show irregular transfers to private accounts controlled by you. Arthur confronted you in September. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Gaines's attorneys objected loudly. The judge sustained it. Financial irregularities weren't the matter at hand. But the seed was planted. During recess, Russ stood outside with Beverly and Autumn. The children had been taken for private interviews. Then Autumn was called to testify. She was nervous, but her voice was steady. My father wasn't there for me when I needed him most. After his accident, he got lost in pain. He pushed everyone away, including me. For 2 years, we didn't speak. Gaines's attorney smiled, sensing victory, but then I saw the news about him and those kids. I watched him protecting them, putting their needs first, and I realized that's the father I remembered. Before everything fell apart, she looked at Russ. Everyone deserves a second chance. Those kids gave him one, and he's shown up for them every single day. Phyllis testified next about how the children thrived under Russ's care. Lorraine spoke about his willingness to work for shelter. Dutch talked about character, about men who do right even when it costs everything. The children's testimony came back from Chambers. The court advocate reported all three expressed clear preference to remain with Russ. They felt safe. They called him family, but the judge's face remained unreadable. Then Patricia stood. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence regarding Arthur Sterling's death. Gaines's attorneys objected immediately. Cause of death isn't relevant. It is if the person seeking custody is responsible for that death, Patricia said calmly. The courtroom erupted. Judge Delacroix gavelled for order. What evidence do you have? Patricia pulled out a folder. I commissioned an independent toxicology review using tissue samples from Arthur Sterling's autopsy. The results show elevated levels of digoxin, a heart medication Arthur wasn't prescribed. She produced the report. Digoxin poisoning mimics heart attack symptoms. Small doses over time cause weakness, fatigue, cardiac arrhythmia. Exactly what Arthur experienced before his death. Gaines had gone pale. Furthermore, I have testimony from Arthur's private nurse, Constance Flores. She observed Mr. Gaines administering what he claimed was prescribed medication to Arthur in the weeks before his death. She was paid to stay quiet. Her guilt led her to come forward. A woman in the gallery stood, middle-aged, nervous but resolute. I saw what he did. I didn't know it was poison until Arthur died. I was too scared to speak up. But I can't stay quiet anymore. The judge called immediate recess. Police were summoned. Gaines tried to leave but found his exit blocked. Chaos in the hallway. Reporters swarmed. Police questioned Gaines, who maintained innocence but couldn't explain the evidence. Russ found the children huddled with Beverly. He knelt down, gathered them close. It's over. Gaines can't hurt you anymore. Did he really kill Papa? Levi asked. The police will investigate. But yes, I think he did, Nina cried into Russ's shoulder. Simon held his hand tight. Levy's face showed rage and grief warring. Patricia found them. The judge has postponed the custody decision until after the criminal investigation. But she's placing the children in your temporary care, Russ, with supervision and regular check-ins, not permanent. But something. Arthur left instructions with his nurse. If anything happened to him, she was to preserve evidence. She kept the medication bottles. They're being tested now. Police think they have enough for an arrest warrant. By evening, Everett Gaines was in custody, facing murder charges. The news spread. Wealthy businessman kills partner for fortune. In a small hotel room, 3 children and 1 guardian tried to process what happened. Papa knew, Levi said quietly. That's why he changed his will. Why he warned me. He knew and tried to stop it. He did stop it, Russ said. Maybe not in time to save himself, but in time to save you 3. By you, Nina said. By all of us. Russ gestured to Beverly and Autumn. Your grandfather believed someone would care enough to help. He was right. Simon pulled out the silver pocket watch, read the inscription. Papa spent his last seconds protecting us. A truth that hurt and healed simultaneously. The next morning brought news that Gaines had confessed. Faced with forensic evidence and witness testimony, he'd broken down and admitted poisoning Arthur over 6 weeks. Arthur was going to ruin him, expose his embezzlement, destroy everything. He'd seen no other way. The confession made headlines. But for Russ and the children, it was simply confirmation of what they'd known. Everett Gaines was exactly who Arthur Sterling had feared. And Arthur's faith in human goodness, his belief that someone would protect his grandchildren, had been vindicated. The week following Gaines's arrest passed in a blur of interviews, paperwork, and careful reconstruction. The media circus that had painted Russ as a kidnapper now celebrated him as a hero. He hated both narratives equally. He'd simply done what needed doing. The judge scheduled a final custody hearing for the following Monday. 6 days to prove he could provide the stability 3 traumatized children needed. 6 days to transform from homeless guardian to responsible parent in the eyes of the law. Patricia moved them into the house Arthur's trust had purchased, a modest 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet Seattle neighborhood called Greenwood. It had a small yard, an oak tree perfect for climbing, and neighbors who baked welcome cookies and asked no intrusive questions. The children explored their new home with cautious wonder. Levi claimed the smallest bedroom, wanting his siblings to have more space. Nina chose the room with the best light for drawing. Simon picked the one closest to Russ's room, still needing that proximity, that assurance of protection. Russ stood in the kitchen, overwhelmed by appliances that worked and cabinets he was expected to fill. Beverly found him there, staring at the refrigerator like it might bite. "It's a lot," she said gently. "I don't know how to do this, how to be what they need. Nobody knows at first. You just show up every day and figure it out as you go." She squeezed his shoulder. "You've been doing that already. Now you just have a roof over your head while you do it." The next days became a crash course in normal life. Patricia enrolled the children in school, starting after Thanksgiving to give them time to adjust. She arranged counseling sessions for trauma processing. She connected Russ with the Sterling Foundation Board to discuss his new position as outreach coordinator. The job was perfect for him in ways Arthur Sterling must have understood. Russ would help homeless families navigate the system, finding housing, securing employment, rebuilding lives. He'd be doing for others what he'd done for himself and the children, but with resources and support Arthur's foundation could provide. "First day is December 1st, Patricia explained, handing him employment paperwork. "Salary is $48,000 a year, modest but sufficient. Health insurance included. The foundation also covers continuing education if you want to pursue social work certification." Russ stared at the papers. 6 months ago, he'd been collecting cans for nickels. Now he had a job, a home, and 3 children depending on him. The weight of it settled heavy and precious on his shoulders. Dutch and Trevor visited on Wednesday, bringing tools and expertise. They spent the afternoon child-proofing the house, installing smoke detectors, fixing the loose railing on the back porch. Simple acts of friendship that meant everything. "You're going to be okay," Dutch said, testing the repaired railing. "These kids are lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." "Yeah, well, lucky or not, you did the work. That's what matters." Thursday brought home visits from social services. Ms. Keating, the caseworker, inspected every room with clipboard efficiency. She interviewed the children separately, asked probing questions about their care and comfort. Russ answered honestly about his struggles, the learning curve of parenting 3, the moments of doubt, the fear of failing them. "But you show up anyway," Ms. Keating observed. "Every day. No matter what," she made notes, her expression unreadable. "The hearing on Monday will determine permanent custody. My report will be part of the judge's consideration. I'll be honest, Mr. Miller, 6 months ago, you would have been my worst nightmare as a guardian. But people can change. The question is whether they change permanently or temporarily." After she left, Levi found Russ sitting on the back porch, anxiety written across his face. "We're going to be okay," Levi said with the certainty only children possess. "Judge Delacroix sees us, really sees us. She knows we belong together. I hope you're right. Papa used to say hope isn't about knowing the future. It's about believing in the present. We're here now. We're together now. That's what matters." Wisdom from an 11-year-old who'd survived too much. Russ pulled him close. "Your grandfather raised you well." Friday evening, Patricia arrived with a folder and serious expression. "We need to talk about Monday." They sat at the kitchen table while the children played in the backyard, Nina pushing Simon on the tire swing Dutch had hung, Levi reading in the grass nearby. "Gaines's arrest strengthened our case significantly," Patricia began. "But the prosecution will take months to build their murder case. The judge won't wait for a conviction to decide custody." She has to rule based on current circumstances, which are mixed. You have stable housing now, employment starting soon, strong character witnesses, and the children's clear preference. But you're still new to parenting, still establishing routines, still learning to manage 3 children with significant trauma. So we might lose, or the judge might grant provisional custody, 6 months supervised, then re-evaluation. Or she might order foster placement with visitation rights. Or, Patricia paused. Or she might grant full custody based on Arthur's wishes and your demonstrated commitment. What's your gut say? My gut says Judge Delacroix is fair and thorough. She'll make the decision she believes serves the children best. Our job is to prove that's keeping them with you. Over the weekend, they prepared. Beverly helped Russ practice testimony, asking the hard questions the opposition might raise. Autumn coached the children on courtroom behavior. Be honest, be respectful, answer only what's asked. Sunday afternoon, the whole support system gathered at the house. Phyllis brought her famous lasagna. Lorraine drove up from Eugene with homemade bread. Dutch and Trevor arrived with ice cream. It was equal parts celebration and solidarity. A chosen family, rallying around its newest members. After dinner, as adults talked in the living room, Simon climbed into Russ's lap. Are you scared about tomorrow? Russ considered lying, putting on a brave face. But these children had earned his honesty. Terrified, me too. But Nina says Papa's watching over us, that he'll make sure we stay together. I hope she's right. She's always right about the important stuff. Simon yawned, leaning heavy against Russ's chest. Will you still be our dad even if the judge says no? The question cracked something open in Russ's heart. Yes, no matter what any judge says, I'm your dad now. That doesn't change. Promise? Promise! That night, after everyone left and the children were asleep, Russ walked through the quiet house. 3 bedrooms with 3 sleeping children. A kitchen with food in the cupboards. A living room with Nina's drawings taped to the walls. A home. He thought about the alley behind Rosie's diner, about rain and garbage, and 3 small faces looking up at him with desperate hope. About the choice he'd made that night. The choice that had changed everything. Patricia's words from earlier echoed. Arthur believed someone would care. He built everything around that faith, and Arthur had been right. But what he couldn't have known was that the caring went both ways. These children hadn't just received rescue, they'd offered it. They'd given Russ purpose when he had none, family when he'd lost his own, a reason to be better than his worst moments. Monday morning came too quickly. Russ woke at dawn, made coffee, tried to calm his racing thoughts. The children were already awake, dressed in the nice clothes Patricia had bought for court appearances. They ate breakfast together, pancakes that Russ only slightly burned, orange juice, nervous small talk. Levi pushed food around his plate. Nina drew on a napkin with a ballpoint pen. Simon held tight to the silver pocket watch, drawing comfort from its weight. At 8 o'clock, they loaded into Patricia's SUV. The drive to the courthouse was quiet. Each person lost in their own thoughts and fears. Beverly and Autumn were already waiting outside. Dutch and Trevor arrived minutes later. Phyllis came, and Lorraine, and even the librarian from Bellingham who'd helped Russ research Arthur Sterling. A collection of people who'd witnessed the transformation of 1 man and 3 children into something like family. Inside the courthouse, Judge Delacroix's clerk directed them to the same courtroom where they'd been before. But this time, Everett Gaines's chair sat empty. His attorneys were gone. The opposition had collapsed with his arrest. It was just Russ, Patricia, 3 children, and a judge who held their future in her hands. Judge Delacroix entered, and everyone stood. She settled at the bench, reviewed the files before her, then looked up at Russ and the children with an expression that revealed nothing. We're here today to determine permanent custody of Levi, Nina, and Simon Sterling. I've reviewed all testimony, home studies, character references, and the children's own statements. I've considered Arthur Sterling's wishes as expressed in his will and letters. I've weighed stability against attachment, resources against love. She paused, and in that pause, Russ's entire future hung suspended. Before I rule, I want to say something. This case has reminded me why I became a judge. To protect children, to honor family in all its forms. and to recognize that sometimes the law's strictest interpretation isn't its wisest application. Russ's heart hammered so hard he could barely hear her next words. Mr. Miller. Approach the bench. He stood on shaking legs and walked forward. The children watched, holding hands in a line on the bench behind him. Judge Delacroix looked him in the eye. Are you prepared for what this means? The responsibility, the scrutiny, the daily challenge of raising 3 children who've experienced significant trauma. Yes, Your Honor. Are you prepared to put their needs above your own comfort, consistently and permanently? I already do that. Every day, she nodded slowly. Then she picked up her gavel, and with one sharp tap, changed everything. Judge Delacroix set down her gavel and picked up a document. The courtroom was so quiet, Russ could hear his own heartbeat. I'm granting temporary guardianship to Russell Miller for a period of 6 months, with review hearings scheduled monthly. Temporary, not permanent. Russ's stomach dropped even as relief flooded through him. 6 months to prove himself. 6 months under scrutiny. The judge continued, outlining conditions. Mr. Miller will establish residence in the home provided by the Sterling Trust. The children will be enrolled in school and receive ongoing counseling services. Mr. Miller will participate in parenting classes and maintain steady employment. Through the Sterling Foundation, Ms. Vance will serve as trust administrator and submit monthly reports to this court. Social services will conduct bi-weekly home visits. She looked up from the document, directly at Russ. I want to be clear, Mr. Miller. This is a probationary period. You'll be under constant evaluation. If at any point I determine this arrangement isn't serving the children's best interests, it will be terminated immediately. I understand, Your Honor. Do you? Because what you've done is remarkable. Protecting these children when they had no one else. But protection in crisis is different from day-to-day parenting, different from managing homework and doctor's appointments and teenage rebellion. She glanced at Levi, which is coming sooner than you think. A small smile touched her face. However, I also recognize that Arthur Sterling was an exceptional judge of character. His entire plan was built around faith that someone would care enough to help. Looking at you, Mr. Miller, and at the support system you've built, she gestured to the gallery full of witnesses. I believe Arthur's faith was well placed. She turned her attention to the children. Levi, Nina, Simon, you've been through more than any child should endure. You've lost your grandfather, been pursued by his murderer, and lived through circumstances no one would choose. But you've also shown remarkable resilience. You chose this man as your guardian, and he chose you as his family. The court is honoring that choice while ensuring your safety and well-being. Looking back at Russ, 6 months, Mr. Miller. Show me that this isn't just crisis bonding. Show me that you can build a stable, lasting family. Show me that Arthur Sterling's trust in human goodness was justified. She banged the gavel once more. Temporary custody granted to Russell Miller. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted in subdued celebration. People hugging, crying, smiling. The children rushed to Russ, wrapping themselves around him like they might never let go. Nina sobbed into his shoulder. Simon clung to his leg. Levi tried to maintain composure, but his eyes were wet. We get to stay? Simon asked, voice muffled against Russ's jacket. You get to stay. Beverly and Autumn joined the embrace. Patricia stood back, professional mask cracking into genuine emotion. Dutch clapped Russ on the shoulder so hard he nearly knocked him over. Outside the courthouse, reporters called questions, but Patricia deflected them with practiced efficiency. They loaded into vehicles and caravanned back to the house in Greenwood, where Lorraine and Phyllis had prepared a celebratory lunch, the house filled with noise and warmth, adults talking, children laughing, food being passed around the table. For the first time since finding the children, Russ allowed himself to breathe, not permanent but real. 6 months to prove what he already knew in his bones. They were family. After lunch, as people began to leave with promises to visit soon, Patricia pulled Russ aside. Don't get too comfortable. The monthly reviews will be thorough. One misstep, one concern from social services, and the judge can reverse this decision. I know. The children will need counseling, real, consistent therapy to process what they've been through. You'll need it too. Already scheduled. First appointments are Thursday. Patricia smiled. You're learning. Good. She handed him another folder. Sterling Foundation paperwork. Your official start date is December 1st, but there's orientation on Wednesday. The board wants to meet you, understand Arthur's vision for the outreach program. What if I'm not qualified? You lived it. That's the qualification that matters. She paused at the door. Arthur would be proud, you know, of what you've done, of who you've become for these children. The words settled warm in Russ's chest. I hope so. That evening, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Russ sat with the children in the living room. A real living room, with furniture and heating and safety. So we have 6 months to prove we work as a family, Levi said, always the one to face reality head on. We already work as a family. Now we just have to show everyone else. Nina curled up against Russ's side. What if we mess up? What if I have a bad day at school, or Simon throws a tantrum, or Levi? Kids are allowed to mess up. That's part of being human. The judge isn't expecting perfection. She's expecting effort and love and showing up. Russ looked at each of them. We can do this, together. Together, Simon echoed, pulling out the silver pocket watch. He opened it, reading the inscription that had become their family motto. Time spent with family is worth every second. Papa knew what he was talking about, Levi said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from shared experience and mutual trust. Outside, the Seattle rain started up again, but inside they were warm and safe. The next morning began the real work. Russ woke the children at 7, made breakfast, scrambled eggs that were only slightly rubbery, and helped them prepare for their first full day in the new house. They explored the neighborhood together. The small park 2 blocks away with swings and a basketball court. The library within walking distance. The grocery store where they'd shop for food now that they had a kitchen. The bus stop for the route that would take them to school starting next week. Everything was new and unfamiliar, but they navigated it together. Russ teaching the children about their new neighborhood. The children teaching Russ about being needed. At the library, Russ filled out applications for library cards, 3 for the children, 1 for himself. The librarian, an older man with kind eyes, processed them with care. Welcome to the neighborhood, he said, handing over the cards. We have story time on Saturdays if the little one is interested. Simon's face lit up. Really? 10 o'clock. Brings kids and parents together. Good community here, community. The word felt foreign and precious. Russ had spent 6 months as an outsider, invisible to people who passed him on the streets. Now he was being welcomed into something, given a place. That afternoon, Beverly and Autumn came over with supplies, school backpacks, notebooks, new shoes for everyone. Beverly had also brought a slow cooker and 3 weeks' worth of easy recipes. You're going to be tired from work and parenting, she explained. Slow cooker meals mean dinner is ready when you need it. Just throw things in before you leave in the morning. Autumn helped the children organize their school supplies, while Beverly walked Russ through meal planning. These simple acts of support, teaching him what he didn't know, filling in the gaps, made the impossible feel manageable. Wednesday brought orientation at the Sterling Foundation. The office was in downtown Seattle, a renovated historic building with exposed brick and large windows. The staff was small, 12 people managing grant programs, community outreach and family services. The director, a woman named Carol Preston, greeted Russ warmly. Arthur talked about this position for years. He wanted someone who understood the struggle firsthand. Someone who could connect with families from a place of genuine empathy, not pity. She showed him his office, modest but bright, with a desk and computer and files on existing programs. You'll be working with homeless families transitioning into housing, helping them navigate paperwork, access resources, troubleshoot problems. Arthur believed the difference between success and failure was often just one person who cared enough to follow through. That sounds like him. From what I've learned, he was a remarkable man. Built this foundation on the principle that everyone deserves dignity and a second chance. Carol smiled. He'd be thrilled that you're carrying on that work. Russ spent the afternoon in training, learning database systems and program requirements and community partnerships. It was overwhelming but purposeful. For the first time in years, he had meaningful work ahead of him. He returned home to find the children doing homework at the kitchen table, work the new school had sent ahead to help them prepare. Levi worked through math problems with focused intensity. Nina sketched in the margins of her reading assignment. Simon laboriously copied spelling words. Normal, beautifully, wonderfully normal. Thursday brought the first counseling session. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in childhood trauma and family systems. Her office was comfortable, soft lighting, cozy chairs, toys for younger children. The first monthly review came on a gray December morning. Judge Delacroix reviewed reports from Ms. Keating, read evaluations from Dr. Chen, examined Patricia's documentation of trust administration and household stability. Russ sat at the defense table with the children beside him. All four dressed neatly, all four nervous. A month had passed since temporary custody was granted. 30 days of homework help and dinner preparation and bedtime stories. 30 days of learning to be a family. The judge read through documents in silence. Finally, she looked up. Ms. Keating reports excellent progress. The children are thriving in school. They're engaged in counseling and showing positive response to treatment. The home is stable, clean, and appropriate. She looked at Russ. Mr. Miller, you've completed parenting classes and maintained steady employment. Your supervisor at the Sterling Foundation speaks highly of your work. Thank you, Your Honor. However, Dr. Chen notes that Simon is experiencing nightmares and Nina shows signs of anxiety. Levi is taking on too much responsibility for his siblings' well-being. She softened her tone. These are expected challenges given their trauma. The question is whether you're equipped to manage them. We're working through it together. Dr. Chen has strategies. I'm aware. I've read her recommendations, Judge Delacroix made a note. I'm continuing temporary custody for the full 6-month period. Next review is January 15th. Keep doing the work. The gavel came down and they had another month. 4 more reviews followed, each one a test they somehow passed. January brought improved sleep patterns for Simon and new coping mechanisms for Nina's anxiety. February showed Levi slowly learning to be a child again, joining a math club and making friends. March brought report cards, all 3 children excelling academically despite their interrupted education. April brought spring and the first real conflict. Levi got into a fight at school, defending Simon from bullies who'd mocked his anxiety. The principal called, and Russ had to leave work early. Ms. Keating documented it. Dr. Chen discussed it in session. At the monthly review, Judge Delacroix addressed it directly. Fighting isn't acceptable, Levi. You understand that? Yes, Your Honor, but they were hurting Simon. I understand the instinct to protect your brother, but you have adults now who can handle these situations. Mr. Miller, how did you address this? Russ straightened. We talked about better ways to get help, about trusting teachers and authorities, but I also told him I understood why he did it. That protecting family is important. We just need to do it the right way. The judge nodded. Appropriate response. Children will make mistakes. It's how we guide them through consequences that matters. She made a note. Custody continues. May brought Mother's Day, a complicated holiday for children without parents. Nina drew a card for Beverly, thanking her for being like a grandmother. Simon made breakfast in bed for Russ, cereal and toast, burned but offered with such love that Russ ate every bite. Levi was quiet all day, remembering his own mother who died when he was 6. That evening, Russ found him crying in his room. He sat on the bed, pulled the boy close, and let him grieve. No words, just presence. Sometimes that was enough. The final review arrived on a warm June morning. 6 months had passed since Judge Delacroix granted temporary custody. 6 months of proving themselves, of building routines, of becoming family, not just in feeling, but in function. The courtroom was familiar now. Same wooden benches, same fluorescent lights. But everything else had changed. The children no longer looked scared. They looked confident, healthy, loved. Russ no longer looked like a man barely holding on. He looked like a father. Judge Delacroix reviewed the final reports thoroughly. Patricia had submitted comprehensive documentation. Ms. Keating's evaluation was glowing. Dr. Chen reported significant progress in all three children. The school had sent letters praising their academic achievement and social integration. Beverly and Autumn sat in the gallery, as they had for every review. Dutch and Trevor were there too. Phyllis and Lorraine had made the trip. The community that had formed around this family filled the benches. Finally, Judge Delacroix set down her papers and looked at Russ and the children. 6 months ago, I took a calculated risk. I placed 3 traumatized children in the temporary care of a man who had no parenting experience, no stable housing history, and every reason to fail. She paused. You haven't failed. You've exceeded every expectation. She picked up a document, official, bearing the court's seal. I'm granting permanent custody of Levi, Nina, and Simon Sterling to Russell Miller, effective immediately. All conditions and restrictions are lifted. The case is closed. The gavel came down with finality. For a moment, no one moved. Then Nina burst into tears. Simon shouted, "Yes!" loud enough to echo. Levi grabbed Russ's hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. You're officially our dad now, Simon asked, needing confirmation. Judge Delacroix smiled, a rare, genuine expression. He's officially your dad now. Legally and permanently. This family is real, the courtroom erupted. People hugging, crying, celebrating. Patricia embraced Russ with uncharacteristic emotion. Beverly sobbed into Autumn's shoulder. Dutch wiped at his eyes and pretended something was in them. Outside, reporters asked for statements. Patricia handled them while Russ gathered the children close. We did it, Levi said, voice thick with emotion. We did, Russ agreed. Can we go home now? Nina asked. Home. The word settled warm and permanent. Yeah, let's go home. They drove back to the house in Greenwood, to the place that had become theirs over 6 months of dinners and homework and bedtime routines. The place where Arthur Sterling's faith had been vindicated and 3 children had found safety. That evening, Patricia arrived with final paperwork, custody documents, official guardianship papers, and 1 more envelope. From Arthur, she explained, to be given when permanent custody was granted. Inside was a photograph, the professional family portrait Arthur had arranged to be taken once the children were settled. Russ and the 3 children, taken just last week by a photographer Patricia had hired. All for smiling, genuine happiness captured forever. On the back, Patricia had written in Arthur's words, from his letter, "This is what family looks like. Remember this joy." Russ placed it on the mantel, next to Nina's drawings and Simon's school awards and Levi's math competition trophy. Evidence of a life built from nothing. Proof that broken people could heal and lost children could be found and family could be chosen as surely as given. They were home. Finally, permanently home. 6 months later, on a cold, rainy evening in December, Russ drove past the alley behind Rosie's Diner on Southeast Morrison Street. Levi sat in the passenger seat, taller now, almost 12, growing into the young man he'd become. In the back, Nina and Simon argued good-naturedly about which movie to watch after dinner. They were heading to the community center where Russ was speaking at a Sterling Foundation event. The same center where Phyllis had first taken a chance on 3 mysterious children and 1 desperate man. Russ slowed as they passed the dumpster where he'd found them a year ago. The rain fell the same way it had that night. But everything else had changed. That's where it started, he said quietly. The children grew silent, looking at the alley that had changed all their lives. That was the night you saved us, Simon said. I think we saved each other. Inside the community center, a crowd of 50 people waited. Struggling families, social workers, donors and volunteers. The center's new wing, the Sterling Family Resource Center, had opened last month, funded by Arthur's estate and managed by the foundation. It provided housing assistance, job training, counseling and support for families in crisis. Before the event began, Russ stood in the hallway with the children. Nina had drawn a banner for the occasion, colorful letters spelling, "Hope starts here." Levi had helped calculate the budget projections that showed how many families they could serve. Simon had insisted on bringing cookies he'd baked himself. They were part of this now, not just recipients of help, but people learning to help others. The speech Russ gave was simple and honest. He talked about losing everything, about the darkness of homelessness, about 3 children who'd needed him exactly when he'd needed purpose, about Arthur Sterling's faith that someone would care, about community and second chances and the power of showing up. "I didn't save these kids," he told the crowd. "Oh, we saved each other. That's what family does. We find each other in the darkness, and we hold on until morning comes." After the speech, families approached with questions and gratitude. Russ connected them with resources, shared his story, offered hope forged from experience. The children helped too. Levi talking with an older brother caring for siblings, Nina showing her art to a shy girl, Simon playing with a toddler while the mother filled out housing applications. They'd learned their grandfather's lesson. Wealth meant responsibility to help others. Driving home that night, the rain had stopped. The house in Greenwood glowed warm through the windows. Dutch's truck was in the driveway. He and Trevor were coming for dinner, as they did most Thursdays. Beverly's car sat at the curb. She and Autumn were already inside, cooking. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and belonging. The dining table was set for 8. Nina's drawings covered the refrigerator. Simon's library books were stacked neatly on the coffee table. Levi's math homework was spread across the kitchen counter. Normal, beautifully, wonderfully normal. Over dinner they talked about everything and nothing, school and work and weekend plans. Saturday was Simon's soccer game. Sunday was Nina's art class, then family movie night. The rhythm of a life built from choice and commitment. After everyone left and the children were in bed, Russ sat alone in the living room. He pulled out his wallet, worn leather that had survived months on the streets, and looked at the photographs inside. The old picture of Autumn at 10 was still there, creased but precious. Next to it was a new photo, professional portrait taken last month of him and the 3 children, all smiling, all healthy, all home. On the back, in Nina's careful handwriting, the Miller family, his name, their choice. Legal adoption had been finalized 2 months ago. They were his children now in every way that mattered. Blood had nothing to do with it. Russ walked through the quiet house, checking on each child one last time before bed. Levi asleep with a book still open, some advanced calculus text that made Russ's head hurt. Nina's walls covered with drawings that showed not trauma now, but imagination and joy. Simon clutching the stuffed dog Autumn had given him, the silver pocket watch on his nightstand. He stood in the doorway, watching them breathe. Remembering that rainy night a year ago, 3 scared children digging through trash, one broken man walking by. A moment that changed everything. So Russ thought about Arthur Sterling, the man he'd never met, but whose life had intersected his in profound ways. Arthur's final gift wasn't just money or security. It was belief. Belief that broken people could heal, that second chances mattered. That family was choice as much as circumstance. The house settled around him with the sounds of home, furnace humming. Rain starting again on the roof, children sleeping safe. In the living room, the family portrait sat on the mantel beside Arthur's pocket watch, which Simon had insisted should be displayed so Papa can see us every day. Around it were the artifacts of their life together, school pictures, participation trophies, Nina's best drawings, a thank you card from a family Russ had helped at the foundation, evidence that love, in the end, was the only inheritance that truly mattered. Russ turned off the lights and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, homework to check, meals to prepare, problems to solve. The daily work of being a parent, which turned out to be harder and more rewarding than anything he'd ever done. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. 4 people who'd found each other in darkness, had built a family from nothing, had proved that the most valuable things in life couldn't be measured in dollars or inherited from wills. They were measured in showing up, in choosing each other, in holding on through rain and doubt and fear until morning finally came, and morning had come. For all of them, Russ closed his bedroom door, lay down in a real bed in a real home, and slept the sleep of a man who'd finally found his way back to himself. Not by traveling far, but by stopping long enough to see 3 children who needed him, and letting them teach him that the greatest journeys are the ones that bring us home.